Hello Marines, Captain DiPietro here from the Marine Corps Detachment in Fort Benning. Welcome back to the fitness report lessons. This is going to be lesson 3 of 3. And today we're going to discuss the master brief sheet. So if you haven't watched lessons 1 and 2 on the MROW and the RS duties, make sure you watch those. You might notice that the RO duties are left out of this. The RO duties are actually really simple when it comes to the fitness report process. There's a lot that goes into it beforehand and during, but as far as the actual process goes, it's fairly simple. So I'm not going to do a video on that. Be sure you get familiar with that if you're in that position or going to be in that position. I haven't had a whole lot of RO experience. That's another reason why I'm not making one of the videos. So if somebody else wants to add on to it, the more the merrier. But we're going to conclude our lessons with the master brief sheet and how to read it and how to understand it, and maybe some tips to make it look a little bit better. This is going to be pretty simple and a fairly short video. So I'm going to dive right into it. We're going to do something similar, like a walkthrough of the master brief sheet, and then we're going to discuss the RS and RO markings at the end. Again, pretty simple, not a whole lot to it. So looking at your MBS or your master brief sheet, the majority of the data is going to be done for you. There's some inputs you can have on there and certainly some things you want to check, but everything for the most part is going to be automatically updated on your master brief sheet. So how you find this, if you aren't familiar, your master brief sheet is going to be located on your OMPF tab in MOL. So log into MOL, go over to OMPF, and then there's going to be something that says master brief sheet and then PES MBS. You might have to wait a little bit for it to load, but once it's loaded, you can click on it, you can download it, print it off if you need to, but you can look and see. And it should update every time it makes a new one. It'll update it and it'll include a new date. So if you get a new award, if you change your billet and it's not updated on there, just make sure you check the date, because maybe it just hasn't processed through the system yet. So again, most of the information is going to be given directly to the master brief sheet. So your name, EIPI, grade, data rank, all that stuff. Your billet is going to automatically update from MOL. That's one of the things I put in red, because make sure that your billet matches your actual billet. So if in MOL, if the billet says you're a platoon commander and now you're an executive officer, then ensure that you update an MOL, and that should translate directly to the master brief sheet. So just keep an eye on that. And then moving down on the master brief sheet, on the left column, it's going to have a lot of data. Just ensure that all this data is correct. It's going to include some important stuff like your time in service, your overseas control date, a bunch of other bullet points are going to be on there. Just make sure that it's accurate. I haven't seen a situation where it's not accurate, but I'm sure it has happened. But just ensure that all that's correct. You also have your awards, very similar to everything else. It's going to feed directly from your awards in MOL. Just keep in mind some things may or may not show up. So it's not going to say on there that you have 18 meritorious mass. It's going to say your personal awards, your Navy and Marine Corps Achievement Medals, Commendation Medals, etc. That's going to be in your awards section. Similar to what we just talked about. Make sure that it is accurately reflecting on your master brief sheet. Then I put MOS in red as well, so there's some columns for additional MOSs on there, not just your primary MOS. So ensure that those are up to date. Sometimes maybe it's not in MOL, and that's why it's not feeding your master brief sheet, but ensure that if you're a marksmanship instructor, if you're a drill instructor, if you're a recruiter, if you have those additional MOSs, make sure that they get noted on your master brief sheet, because that'll help you out a little bit. And then same thing with everything else. Make sure that your rifle, pistol, CFT, PFT, MCMAP, belt, all those things are up to date and that they're accurately reflecting, just in case there's something wrong with the system. On the far right of that little admin section is an area for your language. So this is going to feed directly from MOL. And remember, you can self-report your languages on there. It doesn't get you any money. So if you're looking to use your language to increase your pay, you have to take the test and get certified for it. But let's just say you took something in high school or college and you're still fairly fluent in it, or can at least have a conversation. Don't be afraid to input your own language there on MOL, and then it'll reflect on your master brief sheet too. Below that, same with everything else, you're gonna have your education and your PME. So ensure that those are up to date and reflect what you've actually completed. That's gonna be really important. So especially if you're going on a board and they're looking at your PME and it doesn't reflect what you've completed, just ensure that that's uploaded or it reflects so. And then education can be anything from college courses, education that you've completed in the Marine Corps. Some of that might transfer over on the master brief sheet. Just take a look at what you got. But a lot of times this is going to be reserved for that civilian, like off-duty education. But if you're doing it, that's awesome. And make sure that it gets reflected properly on your master brief sheet. All right, all that is done. You checked it out. It's all good. And now we get to the stuff that is going to have some major impacts on you, right? So you're going to have 3 columns for the rest of your master brief sheet, and they're broken down into the administrative summary, your reporting senior marks, and your reviewing officer marks. And each column is going to have a bunch of numbers, and it can be kind of confusing to read, but on the top of each column, it tells you what each number means. So it's going to say, hey, this is your report average, this is the RS average, that's going to give you your relative value, and then it's going to tell you your percentage, so 80, 90, 100, depending on where you fall on the RS. And then same with the RO, it's going to tell you how many of each Marine that RO has put in each one of the Christmas tree levels, and then it's going to have a little box around the section where they put you in. So you can kind of get a little bit of a RO relative value from that set of numbers along with the box where the RO placed you on his Christmas tree or her Christmas tree. And the administrative summary is just going to tell you some of the data about that finished report, so how long it was, who your RS was, bill it that it was in. So just make sure all that data is accurate. It should feed directly from your actual finished report, so it should already be accurate, but I imagine there have been problems in the past where it wasn't reflecting correctly. So I'm not going to go into details about each little box in the RS and RO markings. We've already talked about in the finished report lesson what relative value means, and this is where you're going to find that relative value, as well as where you compare on the Christmas tree for your RO markings. So ensure you take a look at that in the RS and RO markings. Take a look at what that report average was, so what your average was for the reporting period, and then you can see the RS average. So if you look at your finished report without looking this and you see that you got a 4 as your report average and you're thinking, man, 4 is really low, I don't know what I did wrong, and you look on the master brief sheet and the RS average is a 3 for your rank, well, you're pretty significantly above average there. So that's a good thing. So don't think that, just because I got a 4, I'm good or bad. It's going to depend on what the relative value is compared to that RS average. So that's where you're going to find it. You can compare it. You can see how many reports they have. You can see where you fell out. I've seen examples where somebody is 100 and then their next report from the same RS is another 100, so that's going to lessen the first report. So there's a lot of things you can kind of see by examining the RS markings, or you can kind of see patterns and trends from that RS, or what they do with their reports. So just take a look at that, and that will fall back into what we talked about with lesson 2 with the relative value. All right. At the end of the RS, RO markings, and the admin summary is going to be a giant breakdown of all your percentages and how you compare to the other Marines that the RS and the RO have written on. And it's going to look like a bunch of boxes, so it's going to continue kind of the theme with all these numbers in columns and rows and stuff. But the way that you want it to look, a lot of people call it an hourglass because you don't want to be in the middle, you want to be either at the high end or the low end. But I like to look at it as a bow tie because that's how it's actually written on the master brief sheet. So this is going to be at the bottom here. It's going to be all these numbers. So what you're going to see is your relative value. So your high, average, or below average for the RS. And then you're going to see how many Marines were graded below you, above you, or with you and above you on the RO average. I actually mix those around. So below you, with you, and above you on the RO average. That's why I call it the bow tie, because you want to be looking like a bow tie. So you want your reports on the left of the RS and you want them on the right of the RO. So as you're looking at the numbers, you want a high percentage over here on the left side, which means that the majority of the Marines that RS has written on were ranked below you. And then you want your numbers the highest on the right side of the RO, because that means that the majority of the Marines the RO has written on, he ranked below you on his Christmas tree. All right, so that is one of the most confusing things. I've met a lot of Marines that I've talked to who didn't understand that. It took me a little bit to really grasp how to read it on a master brief sheet. So just make sure you take a look at that, and when you have your master brief sheet in front of you, imagine this bow tie, and that's what we want to get, right? We want high percentages on the ends. So on the left side for the RS and the right side on the RO. What you don't want is you don't want the diamond, okay? So the diamond's gonna look like this, and your breakdown would then be the opposite of the bow tie, right? Because the majority of your reports would be in the middle, and that means that the RS has ranked a lot of people above you, and your RO has ranked a lot of people above you. So we don't want the diamond. we want the bow tie here, okay? It's inevitable you're not gonna get a perfect bow tie, okay? Because the perfect bow tie pretty much means all of your reports are excellent compared to everybody else, and if you have that, then great. But I would say maybe a fairly regular kind of common might be a little bit more like this. So it might be like a cylinder, so you've got a good number above and below for each. Maybe it looks sort of like this. Maybe you've got a few, and then you're in the middle for most of them. Like, that's not too bad. Obviously this is our goal, but there's some different options out there that you can see. I hope that all of you see the perfect bow tie look, but again, it might not look exactly that way. So that's what we're looking for at the bottom. Again, that's going to be at the bottom of your master brief sheet. So after all of this information, you're going to see all the data relative to your RS and RO, and that's going to give you your bow tie, or hopefully a bow tie. All right, as always, let me know if you have any questions. You just put them in the comment section below. We'll try to answer them as quickly as possible. This is really important for you to understand, and especially for your Marines to understand. I can't tell you how many really like young sergeants and staff NCOs have come to me saying, like, hey, I don't understand what a master brief sheet is. They've heard the term like hourglass, but they don't know what it really means. Or you'll have a few that come up with the number thing where, hey, I got a 4 on my last fitness report. I normally get 5s. Like, that's not really good. And then you look through their master brief sheet and say, listen, your RS ranked you above average. So just because you have a different number doesn't mean it's a bad thing. All right? So as always, hopefully you learned something, and thank you very much for your time. Enjoy your day.